Welcome in, everybody. We are going to change tack right now because we were going to preview the games, Austin, like every week.
We were.
And then you started dropping some of the most absurd,
These
ridiculous,
are not absurd,
burning to the ground takes I have ever heard in my life surrounding this NFL 100 all-time team that we have going right here. We have the running back list that dropped. And our boss, Chris Collinsworth, was part of the whole TV show. It's Chris, it's Rich Eisen in there, Bill Belichick. A lot of smart people appear to have been assembled to create this list. But you, who's like 12 years old, decided that you knew better.
So let's go over the list first. I think for those who don't know the list,
let's hit the list. So hang on, let's first talk about the premise. What is this thing? The NFL is revealing the 100 greatest players and the 10 greatest coaches in NFL history. So every Friday night at 8 Eastern through December the 27th, they're going to tick things off by position, right? Running backs was the first show. So they have, were there 10 running backs or 12? 12 running backs were revealed as part of this all-time team. Most of them are the names you'd expect, but because the game is like 100 years old, we've gone back into the archives a bit. And
way back.
The further we go from, the millennium, the less you have any idea what you're talking about. And yet those are the ones you have the most problem with.
But, so I'm willing to admit that I don't know what I'm talking about with a lot of the guys on this list. But like Jim Brown, so let's go over the list.
Let's
go
run
over
through the list.
Here's the 12.
You want to take them?
Yeah, I'll take them.
Okay.
12 running backs. It's Jim Brown, Earl Campbell, Dutch Clark. We'll get to him later. Eric Dickerson, Lenny Moore, Marion Motley, Walter Payton, Barry Sanders, Gayle Sayers, O.J. Simpson, Emmitt Smith, and Steve Van Buren, a.k.a. the Honduran Hurricane.
Yes.
So of that list.
So let's start. What is your biggest problem with the list?
My biggest problem with the list is Dutch Clark. Dutch Clark,
hang on. So first of all, Dutch Clark played in the 1930s.
Yes.
For the Portsmouth Spartans, who then became the Detroit Lions.
Yes.
So that's how far back we're going here, which should give you some indication, if you're watching, of just how little Austin has any idea what we're talking about.
So here,
for example, before today, had you ever heard of the Portsmouth Spartans?
Yes, I have a couple jerseys at home.
No, you don't.
I have not. I have not heard of the Portsmouth Spartans.
Okay, so before today, you hadn't even heard of the team that he played for,
no,
let alone the player, and yet in the last 3 minutes of research, you've come to the conclusion that he's a bum.
Yes. And that's all I need.
Hit me with your case.
Here's my case. I dive into that. There's only one name I really, really have some qualms over, and it's Dutch Clark. I was like, this guy better have been a monster in the 1930s, wherever he did play.
So you realize he didn't have the greatest level of knowledge backing this up. So you went and did some research.
So I went and did some research, first of which, watching the clip from the show to see the highlights they did show of him. All of them are terrible.
So you've seen at least 3 plays of his in black and white grainy footage.
Yeah, and that's all I need. So grainy footage. So they talked about Bill Belichick talked about him as a two-way player.
Yes.
Which I didn't know that fact.
Pretty much everybody was back
I didn't know that
30s.
categorized you as one of the best running backs of all time, but here we are.
That's true. It doesn't.
Great thrower, and when he says great thrower out loud on the show, they show him throwing a punt that is like a 4-yard screen.
This is true. Having said that, he also then articulates that they were basically throwing a leather brick back then. So it's not like throwing the Tom Brady deflated ball we have here.
Okay.
It's like throwing a medicine ball. Right? You know the things with the Y over there? Except leather, battered, round. Like it was like throwing a medicine ball. So anyone that was an accomplished passer back in the 1930s, they're different standards, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and
you're
one of the standards
them.
is like bad, I guess. It wasn't even. It was like terrible throw on of 3 air yards. It was awful. So then I dive into the stats.
Yes.
The highlights are garbage. Then I dive into the stats here, Pro Football Reference, and I know you're not expecting to see a 2,000-yard rusher in the 1930s.
Okay.
The season was shorter.
Yes.
You don't play as many games. Obviously, it was a tougher game back then. The fields looked like terrible. You're not sprinting off long runs in that. So then I go right to his best season, and he was an All-Pro every year except for his final year.
Yeah.
Then I go to his best season. In his best season, 1934, 28-year-old Dutch Clark, 763 yards on 123 attempts, 6.2 yards per carry average, which is nice. He didn't even rank first in rushing yards that year, though. He was third in rushing yards that year.
Did he rank first in yards per attempt?
He did rank first in yards per attempt and yards per game. However, after that, the following year, he averaged 3.6 yards per carry and only 427 yards and still got an All-Pro. That's disgusting.
Do you know what the league-wide average in yards per attempt was back in the 1930s?
I will check right now.
Okay.
I will check right now.
Because that would seem like a relevant piece of information.
It is.
If you're slamming him for his yards per attempt figure.
Yep.
Would you not agree?
No, I agree. I
Okay.
agree. So I'm going to dive in here.
I would just suggest that your ability to fairly evaluate the career of Dutch Clark, who was playing, 70 years before you were even born, is questionable.
Fair. No,
and I would also suggest that the 5 minutes of research to pull up his career statistics as a way of evaluating it is somewhat it's not complete. It's a non-exhaustive
He made
measure.
an All-Pro the following year after his best year, ranking 5th in yards per carry. He ranked 4th in total rushing yards, and he ranked 5th in yards per game. That's just garbage. He was garbage at the running back position, even in that era.
Remember that we've talked a lot on at PFF about how running backs are a product of their environment.
Yes.
Sometimes your yards.
So
and your
I have my hottest
statistics-
take after this.
This isn't even your hottest guy. Sometimes your statistics are not necessarily a fair reflection of how well you've been playing. That's why PFF grades will have certain running backs higher than just.
And if we
the
graded some of the
leaders.
highlights I saw, it would be laughable. It would be a couple zeros and some net minus 0.5s.
True. Having said that, remember that our tagline is every player, every play, every game. And yet on 3 plays, you've decided that this Hall of Famer with an All-Pro every season he played is a bum.
Yeah. He didn't even start barely over half his game. He started 45 of his 75 career games.
Okay, but right now we know that starting is simply a dynamic of which formation you lined up in.
True.
Do you
but
know what
still,
starting was a product of in the 1930s?
Probably not.
No.
So here's my hottest take.
Oh, God. What do we got?
Beatty Feathers was a better running back than Dutch Clark. Beatty Feathers in his rookie year beat out, in 1934, which was also Dutch Clark's best year, beat him out in yards. He averaged 8.4 yards per carry across 119 attempts. 1,004 yards. He was an 1,000-yard rusher in the 30s.
Who the hell is...
Beatty Feathers, he's obviously amazing. He played LH, the position. I don't know what that is. But hear me out. So what doesn't get talked about enough, Beatty Feathers, after that 119 rushing, rookie season, I think injuries derailed his career because he didn't get over 100 carries the rest of his life. He is the
Gayle Sayers?
No. What's the Raiders' back? He is the Bo Jackson of the 30s. He had a hip injury. I'm looking into it, dude. Just take the reins. I'm diving into Beatty Feathers here.
I need to know who he was. I don't need to know if he got a Bo Jackson level hip injury.
Beatty Feathers was a Native American, Big Chief. This guy is like pretty much America's pastime. The fact that there's not a movie about this guy is absurd. He played college football and college basketball. He was the Antonio Gates of the 30s.
I think we need to set up a show where I'm sure that whatever
he was
studio,
the first player in NFL history to rush for over 1,000 yards, and he did it as a rookie.
in the year that Dutch Clark.
Yes, in the year that Dutch Clark had his career year with 700 yards, like a bum.
I don't know if they're using the studio that
his 91.3 yards per game is a Bears rookie franchise record to this day.
Well, there you go.
Beatty, baby.
There's more records from these guys that still stand that you want to dismiss. I don't know if they're using the studio that NFL Network used to create this show, but, the boss, we can find some free time from him after the season. I think we owe it to the world to have you sit down with Chris in that studio and explain where he made a mess of all this, of the team, right? Because on NFL.com right now, they have little write-ups from all of these players, and they've got a little snippet from Bill Belichick, and they've got a little snippet from the boss, Chris Collinsworth. I think we owe it to the world to have you sit down with Chris and explain where he made a mess of the entire team, because you appear to have some pretty hot fire takes.
So let's go back to Beatty. One last thing on Beatty.
Oh, God.
Big Chief. Dude, obviously his heart wasn't in NFL because the guy ended up coaching baseball, and he coached at NC State, Texas Tech.
You were looking at his wiki page.
Yes,
and
finding out
of which
and
is
finding
like
out about a
line.
legend. About a legend here, Beatty Feathers, Big Chief. I feel bad that Dutch Clark made this list and not Beatty Feathers. Some people are claiming for LT. Some people want Adrian Peterson. Beatty.
You have an interesting take on that one. Let's go there as well. So neither AP. So your other problem with this list, or one of your other problems with this list, is there wasn't a single running back drafted after 1990, did you say? The last one was Emmitt Smith, right?
What'd you say?
There wasn't a single running back in this list drafted after 1990, was it?
Yeah.
So
I think
Emmitt Smith was the last running back drafted on this list. Barry Sanders the year before in 89. Nobody after those guys. So that excludes the likes of Adrian Peterson, LT. Does that exclude Marshall Faulk as well, or is he just excluded because we don't like him that much?
I think it does exclude him.
All right, well, whatever. So So the obvious one is the Adrian Peterson, LaDainian Tomlinson question. One of our video guys, Ken, was asking us which guy was better, right? My argument was that Adrian Peterson is a better pure ball carrier than LT, but LT was a more complete player. He was a better player as a receiver. You could leave him into pass block. Somehow Adrian Peterson's inability to pass block throughout his career has been spectacular. You have an interesting take, though, on those two guys, and which I'm particularly interested in because you saw LT play live, right? Unlike most of these guys, right? How old were you when LT was beating up
in
the
his
Raiders?
best years? I was 10, 11, or 12. Around, those were like kind of like his highlight years for me.
Right. So
and I was critically analyzing the game back then.
Sure.
Really.
I mean, you kept extensive notes. You were analyzing things deeply. But that's what you're going on. You think LT was better based on your opinion of him as a 10-year-old.
I think I don't know. I think it's tough. But I just know Dutch Clark was not better than LT. I just know it. Based off what I've seen, based on this limited research, I would be more confident putting in LaDainian Tomlinson, who was dominant across a large period of time, and era adjusted dominant, and I just can't imagine Dutch Clark, who didn't even start all the games he played in, barely played 6 or 7 years, and had one good season where he didn't even lead the NFL in rushing. It was Beatty. It was Big Chief Beatty Feathers that beat him.
Okay, so that's that. Well, let's move on from Dutch Clark because this feels like we're beating up on a guy that
And that, so
may not
okay, so
deserve
I feel like I need to say this. Dutch Clark, I have nothing against the guy. Okay, it's not like I don't
feels
like
a
him.
lot like you
no,
have
I feel like
against
some
him.
of this has been treated personally, but I do not like Dutch Clark. I just think, based on the evidence, the limited evidence I do have gathered, the dude was not that good and inflated by just like they were picking all pros out of a hat back then. Like there's no way Dutch Clark was actually that good.
I think the key term in all of that is limited knowledge with which you have right now.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible that Dutch Clark was not as good.
A positive on Dutch Clark, though. He played in one playoff game. And in that game, 7 attempts, 80 yards, a touchdown.
Yes.
That's solid for me.
It is.
I'm impressed that on the big stage he did step up.
It is entirely possible that based on the totality of evidence that Dutch Clark doesn't deserve a place as an inaugural member of the Hall of Fame.
I agree.
He doesn't deserve 6 All-Pros, one for every season in which he played.
He literally got an All-Pro every year he played, including the year following his great year where he was kind of a bum.
That he wasn't one of the best players to ever play. Having said that, it's also possible that you simply don't have enough information to have any earthly idea what
and
you're
I'm willing
talking
to
about.
admit that. And I'm willing to admit that.
So
my limited evidence isn't enough. Bill Belichick, having watched the guy live, I mean, whatever. I feel like not live, but Bill Belichick definitely knows.
Bill Belichick wasn't watching the game in the 1930s.
Bill Belichick definitely knows more about Dutch Clark than me.
I think that's very true.
And that's fair, and I tip my cap.
Okay, so what other problems with this list do you have?
Going back to the list here, that was the major problem.
It really was. That's where you spent most of your time.
I feel like other than that, I didn't have a ton of problems with the list.
You
just
started off. You went through and you looked at Dutch Clark's highlights, concluded that he was a bum. You then went to do the same thing with the other players that you'd never heard of. So you wandered through.
Steve Van Buren, the Honduran Hurricane, looked actually very good.
Right. You went through Steve Van Buren's highlights. You passed him.
He
as
looked
acceptable.
like a stud, and he played way longer than he did. Finished with did we even mention Dutch Clark career rushing yards 2,700? Like, are you serious? Well, the Honduran Hurricane had way more than that, and he was battling what was obviously probably people didn't like him because he was from Honduras. Like, that's a freaking problem. That must have been difficult for him. He didn't have an easy slate like Dutch Colorado Clark. Okay, that guy had the gravy train all the way through. Honduran Hurricane had to break some freaking boundaries, man.
Right.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Steve Van Buren is way more deserving, and I never watched Steve Van Buren play.
You didn't
way
until
more
today. So
until today.
You've passed him as acceptable, having gone through about 7 of his highlights as well. You also signed off on
Lenny Moore. I liked Lenny Moore.
You did. You thought he was pretty good.
Yeah, I turned on the highlights. Dude's long leg, look elusive. I mean, that guy looked pretty solid for me.
Okay.
I'm all in. And he played in color footage, made things a little bit easier to analyze.
Is there a single player on this list that you saw play
live
before the age of?
Dude, I was born in 1994. I didn't watch any of these guys really.
Right.
And if I did, I was very, very young.
Well, that didn't appear to stop you when it came to LT versus Adrian Peterson.
No, that's true. Well, I feel like I've seen more of AP than I have of LT.
So that in and of itself is interesting. It's just how animated you got over this list, having seen literally none of them.
I've watched a ton of LT, maybe not live.
And he's not on the list.
Yeah, but he should be for Dutch Clark. That's the only sub I'd make.
So let's go as
and
modern.
And Marshall Falk, San Diego State alum.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Let's go as modern as this list gets, right?
Okay.
And go into one of the great debates of the 1990s, which is Barry Sanders versus Emmitt Smith. Where does Austin Gayle stand on the great 1990s debate of which running back is better.
I think I don't have enough information.
That didn't stop you when it came to Dutch.
Well, Dutch.
No. Let's not hammer Dutch any further. I'm just saying.
You're putting me on the spot here.
That didn't prevent you from laying the hammer on old Dutch Clark.
You're right. So, and I apologize. I'm going to again apologize for the Dutch Clark truthers out there. Okay. I will. But with the difference between Emmett Smith, Barry Sanders, I don't know. I don't really have I don't have enough evidence to really make a claim.
You dove straight into the 1930s and wrote off the career.
Let me dive into the stats for Barry.
Of an inaugural Hall of Famer, a man that was an All-Pro every season of his career. Wrote him off as a bum based on 3 highlights, and yet Emmitt Smith versus Barry Sanders, who are what, number 1 and 4 right now?
I want to lean Emmitt Smith.
If you're leaning that way because he had more yards, I might have to throw you out of this building.
Leaning that way until I find evidence elsewhere.
Okay, so
what's your take on it? Give us your take. You're the one watching him live.
I was a massive Barry Sanders fan.
Gotcha.
I think that Barry Sanders never had the kind of platform. We talk about running backs being a product of their environment, right? Nobody had a greater platform than Emmitt Smith did. Now, he was a really good running back, and he was able to turn a lot of those positive platform plays into even more. It's not like he wasn't adding value on top of that platform, but I don't know that Barry Sanders ever had the kind of platform that Emmitt Smith had to work from in terms of that offensive line, in terms of a Hall of Fame quarterback, in terms of a good passing game, setting things up. Eric over here, who just wandered in, would probably have a good take on the Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders thing. What have you got, Eric?
Barry Sanders was a lot better runner.
Eric says Barry Sanders was a lot better runner,
but Emmitt did all the other things.
but Emmitt did all the other things better.
They both don't hold Marshall Faulk's water.
Oh,
Eric says that Marshall
Faulk needs to
beats
belong in
them
the
both.
conversation, and as an Aztec alum, I think I'm going to side with them.
Okay, all right. I can.
Faulk had 2,000 yards receiving in like a 2-year span while being a bell cow.
Yes, Eric points out that Marshall Faulk had 2,000 receiving yards in a 2.
Yeah, the receiving production is key, dude. I mean, he had to look at
while
this
being a
1,
bell cow
2,
running back.
5 consecutive seasons with over 100 targets and over 80 receptions. That's wild.
I
For
think
a running back, that's legit.
I think there's a very
Dutch Clark
strong,
didn't have 86 receptions in his fucking dreams. Okay,
would
there's
you,
zero
A, get
chance.
off the Dutch Clark thing, and B, stop dropping F-bombs on the live stream.
That's on me, but still, I'm blown away right now by this production.
I think there is a very strong case that Marshall Faulk belongs on that list. I think
for who? If you had to take one out, now let's put the pressure on you. If you had to take a name out of that list, and you're telling me it's anyone but Dutch Clark,
right? Well, here's the thing. I acknowledge that I have simply no way of knowing whether Dutch Clark belongs on this list or not. I am bowing to the superior knowledge of other people in saying that Dutch Clark belongs in here. I have no idea whether he did.
And I was
does
willing
or
to, and I was willing to bow. I was willing to take that knee when Chris and Bill Belichick are talking about. But when you dive into it,
here's
and then
the
you
thing.
think about the people snubbed, and it's like Dutch Clark. You're kidding.
I would argue, so based off the people that I've actually seen some play, right, and have some working knowledge of what the hell I'm talking about, as opposed to you, who just dives into a Wikipedia page and declares the guy's useless.
Millennial research.
I would argue that Emmitt Smith had the single best platform of any of these backs, and if you plugged most of them into his situation, you would also be looking at the all-time leading rusher in NFL history, assuming they were able to hang on as long as he was. Like Emmitt Smith's durability and simple ability to hang on playing for that many years is basically the reason he's the NFL all-time leading rusher.
I think this is a good
I
opportunity.
would say that Marshall Faulk may have been a better running back than Emmitt Smith.
Dude, Marshall Faulk was legit, very much legit, and I think this is a good opportunity to bring up, I think, a debate that doesn't get talked about enough. Frank Gore, where does he stand on the all-time list of running backs? Because
nowhere near this list.
He's the definition of longevity, though. I mean,
Frank Gore is the latest Curtis Martin, who is just a guy that hung around for like 15 years. And didn't
because there are some like San Francisco 49ers fans that are like legit like dude, Frank Gore's a first ballot Hall of Famer, blah blah blah. Like I just can't get on board with that.
Eric agrees with my take that Frank Gore doesn't belong anywhere near the list, but objected to my my disparaging of Curtis Martin's career.
I take it back. But Curtis Martin rushing for 4.6 yards per carry at 1,700 yards in his age 31 year.
That's impressive, but again, it's a durability thing. I'm just saying that there are people out there as well that are simply impressed by that level of durability and consistency, and I respect that. I don't agree with it, but I respect it. To me, longevity is just an accident of either a freak of injury luck or simply a genetic, you didn't get broken down by
but I
things.
mean, Frank Gore definitely works hard to not get hurt.
Of course he works hard, but so does everybody else. It's not like nobody else is out there working.
I'm not willing to say it's all luck there. I mean, I think that guy's like probably lives in the weight room, does all the right things to not get hurt.
I'm sure most running backs are taking care of themselves.
Dutch Clark
don't have the same kind of injury luck. Plus, Frank Gore didn't in college. Like, that's the ironic thing about Frank Gore. The dude is coming off like back-to-back knee injuries at Miami, was seen as a durability question mark coming into the league, and then just didn't break down for like 15 years and has now overtaken Barry Sanders in career rushing yardage. Like, if that's what you're judging things on, we can't talk.
So here we go. So we have Jay.
Way better.
We
than
have
Frank
Jay
Gore.
Marshall in the YouTube comments with a San Francisco 49ers logo as his YouTube picture. Frank Gore is definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer. Like I said, there are 49ers fans that think Frank Gore is legit first ballot,
But
and
he's not even the best 49ers running back.
And I can't get
ever.
on board.
Like, Roger Craig was a better running back
Garrison
than Frank
Hurst,
Gore.
maybe.
No,
No,
stop that.
I'm just bringing up
you need
guys
to stop
I've
bringing
heard
up
of.
names of people.
Wow. Well, I think this is a good opportunity to segue.
I think we should do this for every position that they break out.
I definitely
would
think it's
love
good.
to see Austin Gayle's breakdown of people he's never seen before that played in the 1940s.
Can we get you to admit, before we move on to let's preview a couple of the games, a couple of the big games.
You actually want to talk about games?
Let's preview a couple of the big
games. You think we can segue
But
neatly from Dutch Clark is trash to, hey, the Bucks and the Falcons are about to play?
Before we get off this topic here.
Okay.
So you like Marshall Faulk, Barry Sanders, or already on there, but Marshall Faulk, LT, whatever. If you had to put Marshall Faulk in, who are you taking him? Who are you taking out? I need you to admit it.
I don't know. I don't know enough about Dutch Clark.
Don't you dare. If you had to pick, you got 5 seconds. You have to pick. You're telling me right now you're going to pick Dutch Clark. You have to.
All those guys. I mean, I'm probably picking one of the guys I don't know anything about just because I don't know anything about them.
Exactly. But
that seems like an unfair way of dealing with that.
Beady Feathers, that's all I'm going to finish this thing on. Deserves more recognition.
Yes.
And let's go ahead and move forward here.
And you think we can seamlessly transition into the NFL slate?
Yes, I do. Let's talk about some of the big games. Start with the game of the week. PFF's game of the week, meaning even if you're not an Edge or Elite subscriber, you can check it out.
We're only talking about the game of the week because I can't do a whole slate after hearing your Dutch Clark
Let's
trash.
do this. So Frank Gore is suiting up for the San Francisco 49ers. So game of the week, Sunday Night Football will be the Green Bay Packers at the San Francisco 49ers. Right now, 49ers favored by 3.5. Greenline has them covering that number. A certain percentage of the time. You got to dive in there, though. You got to dive into Greenline for that. But let's go ahead and talk about this game. Start with the San Francisco 49ers. How do they win this game?
So this has some of the best individual matchups of any game this week. Nick Bosa has been, a pass rushing monster as a rookie. He's going up against David Bakhtiari, who has been the gold standard for left tackle pass protection over the past, 4 or 5 seasons, something like that. I think he had overtaken Joe Thomas by the end of Joe Thomas's career in terms of pass blocking only. Really made that into his own over the past couple of seasons. Maybe this year, Ronnie Stanley has been better, though you have to sort of talk about how much he's aided a little bit by the system they're running in Baltimore. But you're basically talking about arguably the best pass blocker in the league at left tackle. Nick Bosa has a pass rush win rate, literally the best of any player in the NFL. So the best pass rusher in terms of percentage of plays that he is actually generating either pressure or beating his man. That's one of the best one-on-one matchups of the year. This 49ers defensive front has been nasty. They, I think, can take things to the Green Bay Packers offense and put Aaron Rodgers under some pressure. And that obviously helps the 49ers secondary, who get to go up against those Green Bay receivers that haven't really been that fantastic. Devontae Adams is their one superstar. He's working his way back from the injury that held him out for some time. We've seen little glimpses of him getting back there, but he's going to need to step it up and be, all the way back this week if they're going to get joy against that 49ers defense.
Very true, very true. I think that there's a lot of reasons why, the San Francisco 49ers are favored. I think something that's not brought up enough is Nick Bosa and that defensive line has done such a good job to help that secondary. Because I don't think the secondary, Richard Sherman and company, have gotten worlds better. I think a lot of it is them playing better with that, that pass rush hitting home a lot more often than it did a year ago. Arik Armstead's playing better. You're seeing plus play from Ronald Blair, like that entire defensive line. Robert Salah, probably a future head coach candidate, what he's done with the San Francisco 49ers defense. Let's flip to the Packers. What are the strengths of this roster, and how do they come out of this one with a W? I
think the interesting thing is that defense has quietly taken steps back. We thought to the beginning of the year they might actually be the reason this team is winning games. And as the season has gone on, They really haven't been able to maintain that kind of play. The defensive line looked nasty earlier in the year. It's not playing quite that well anymore. It's still generating some pressure, so it's going to pose a challenge to the 49ers offensive line. But and then the back end, the secondary hasn't played nearly as well. We were sort of crowning Jair Alexander as the best young cornerback in the NFL after a few weeks. That hasn't really maintained. He's been giving up some plays. So really how this 49ers offense, can they have the same level of success? And ultimately, can Jimmy Garoppolo stop throwing the ball straight to linebackers? Because that's a problem.
Dude, that was a problem. That was definitely a problem.
I talked with Steve about this on the PFF podcast early in the week. There are certain quarterbacks who don't seem to be able to see linebackers. You know, when they throw interceptions or turnover-worthy plays, it's almost always the same variety, right? It's the dropping linebacker that you just never see in the entire thing, right?
Yeah.
You just, for whatever reason, they don't find those guys at that second level. They're looking at the secondary. That's where they see
their focus
move.
is always,
And the ball is straight to that guy underneath that they just never see. And I think Jimmy Garoppolo is one of those quarterbacks. When he makes the mistake, it's the dropping linebacker that he just never saw in the picture, and it looks horrendous. He needs to stop doing that because those are they're terrible plays, but also those are game-changing plays. Those turnovers, those are the ones that often end up in monstrous returns as well, because those guys are basically undercutting the play, heading in the opposite direction. So those are massive problems.
All right, well, that's going to do it for the preview, man. You want to preview any other games?
No, I don't. I want to get out of here. You've
I think
laid waste to the career of Dutch Clark
and
previews.
I really do like this idea. I think we go into next week with the next position group, and we kind of give our takes. Because if it's anything like the first one, it's going to be a bunch of people in the 30s that barely averaged over 100 yards a game.
Right, based upon some statistics you're going to write off.
Exactly.
And then at the end of the year, we can put Austin
Didn't even mention that Dutch Clark's 6 foot, 185 pounds. Come on. You're gonna put.
Then we can
ridiculous.
put Austin next to.
I need to look
Chris
up how big
at a
BD Feathers
table
was.
and have the two of them go back and forth, and that is.
Dude,
where
when Chris comes into the office this week, I'm gonna be like, Dutch Clark, are you serious?
But wait, save it all up till after the season. We can sit him down.
No, you know what my first question to Chris is? I'm like, do you know who BD Feathers is?
Yeah.
And if
that's
he
what you
says
should do.
no and he didn't even consider him, that's just ridiculous.
We'll sit them both down opposite a table. We'll have them argue it out, and that's where we get our Emmy.
BD Feathers was 5'10", 180 pounds. And this nickname was Big Chief.
We need to get out. Somebody kill the live stream, and then
I-
I'll kill Austin. And
I'm
then we can just
legit.
get
I'm
away from
legit
this.
bigger than BD Feathers.
We're done. No, you're not.
I could
Get
have.
out of
I
here.
could
You're
have run
like-
for 1,000 yards.
You're
in
like
the 1930s.
5'8", 180.
I'm a better running back than Dutch Clark if I played in the 30s. Boom. That's the take. That's the take.
We need to stop recording right now before one of us dies.
Fantastic.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the week.